Evening and welcome to the Fitchburg City Council Legislative Affairs Committee. I now call this meeting to order. Please be advised that FATV is conducting audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. I ask that anyone in the audience who is recording this meeting to please stand and identify yourself by name and address. Seeing none, I ask that all electronic devices be placed in silent mode at this time. Present this evening, we have Councillor Kuchar, Councillor Cruz, myself, President Zarella, and Councillor Van Hazinga participating remotely. And we now have on... I'm sorry, Chief, do you have the petition item number?
I do. Petition 139-22.
Thank you. We will begin with that one as I'm waiting for my agenda to come up.
Would you like a copy of it?
Certainly, that would actually be excellent. Thank you. All right, we will begin with 13922, Tom Skorowski, Executive Director of Community Development and Planning, and Amy LeBlanc, Senior Project Manager, to make a series of amendments to Chapter 169 of the City Code, as well as road closure changes to correspond to the two-way conversion project scheduled for a June 30th completion. Proposed changes are attached. Mr. Skorowski or Chief Martineau?
I would defer to Mr. Skorowski.
I could kick things off, Chief, and then hand it over to you if you'd like.
Sure, thank you.
Great. Good evening, councilors. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today, but look forward to discussing this with the full council in person next week. What you have in front of you is a series of ordinance changes corresponding to Chapter 169 in the City Code related to the steps needed to make the main Boulder conversion complete. These steps relate to parking, removal of meters, the institution of time-limited parking, prohibited left turns, prohibited right turns on red, stop intersections, yield intersections, required rights, required lefts, and then, of course, the changes just to actually convert the streets in the code from one-way to two-way. And we submitted to the council a memo on behalf of Ty and Bond, the engineering team that has been working with us on this project. We have Alex Bagnan present, the lead engineer from Ty and Bond, to answer any technical questions. But basically, the memo laid it out pretty clearly, and then we included an Excel file that went chapter and verse through every amendment that would be needed, either repealing or enacting something new. And then there also is a key plan that basically identifies each and every ordinance change needed on the plan itself. So if you look at the Excel, row A in the Excel is called Legend, and it uses a terminology basically to key in on the plan where each of these changes are taking place. But again, this was created by Ty and Bond, our engineering consultants, but really vetted over the last 2 years with the Fitchburg Police Department, who I know is present, as well as the Fitchburg DPW and the Community Development and Planning Department, the Mayor's Office. And you know, we're here to answer any technical questions you might have with this whole slew of changes, but just to outline the intended process here, it's really a two-step process because ultimately in about 2 weeks, we can make this conversion to two-way Main Street, two-way Boulder Drive official. It's really, the onus is on the city to determine exactly when that date is going to be. But we've got about a 2-week window where we can start having that conversation. And we've got to, in the short term, utilizing Chapter 169.3, the experimental regulations that the City Council has the ability to enact, we need to implement short-term ordinance changes through this 169.3 that would last for a 90-day period. And then concurrently, after that takes place, we would have the actual formal ordinance be working through the rounds, going to public safety, going to the Public Works Committee, and then ultimately City Council working through its final readings, so we can enact this into law. Because, you know, for the police department, it's important, of course, for enforcement. You need to enforce the laws that are on the books, and if that doesn't reflect the situation on the ground, we have to change them. But also for city liability, we want to make sure everything that is in the plan and is being built is reflected in our city code. So again, the intent here would be for the Legislative Affairs Committee to make recommendations to the council. And at the council's next full meeting in June, the goal would be for the council to set a date by which these rules under 169.3 would go into effect over a 90-day experimental period. And then again, concurrently, we would send the formal ordinance itself, working with the city solicitor's office, back to the council, going to Public Safety and the Public Works Committee with the goal to have the final ordinance change pass through its readings in the first meeting in September. So I don't know if it makes sense to talk about that process or answer any questions you might have just about how the process is working its way through. I could answer any questions related to that, and then, of course, the technicalities of each and every ordinance change itself. But I'll stop there for a moment.
Any questions from councilors? Seeing none, you can go right ahead.
Okay. And Chief Martineau, I don't know if you had anything to add there.
No, you said it extremely well, Tom, thank you, but I just want to reiterate the importance behind incorporating 169-3, because that gives the members of my department the authority to enforce the rules of the roadway, especially if something significant or tragic happens on our roadways. Without an enforcement opportunity, it would put the city in significant liability. So the adoption of the tie and bond report during this 90-day period is extremely important for us to have the authority to enforce the rules of the roadway.
And then ultimately, this would allow us to see what's working, what's not, and make any necessary tweaks before the final ordinance goes through its readings in that first week in September too. So there's some, I guess, experimental benefits to that too, so we can tweak things as needed for that final reading. But I can work our way through each of the changes now. And I don't know, I guess Councilor Zurella, I'll defer to you. Do you want me to go through each and every one of these, or do you want me to talk just more broadly about the types of changes that we're looking at?
I will defer to my committee members on that. I think I personally have a pretty good grasp of what's going on, but if the committee members would like a more detailed rundown, I would certainly be amenable to that. It looks like they are saying they're all set, so yeah, if you just give us an overview that and highlight any specifics that you think need to be highlighted, either for the council or the public.
Okay, great. So I'm going to base it off of the Excel that we had sent to the council, which outlined the I guess 67 changes that are needed. But essentially, the first grouping all the way to row 28 are related to parking prohibited at all times. And on Boulder Drive, you know, there will no longer be parking on Boulder Drive on street. So we had to enact that throughout the duration. You know, there will be no parking. And then there's a few different spots throughout Main Street where parking will be prohibited now, and those changes might have been made for safety reasons. They might have been made to create new loading zones, because, you know, if you go down Main Street these days, you'll often see folks stopping in the middle of the road because it's 2 lanes one way, using it as a de facto loading zone. But, you know, in total, we probably only lost a few spots on Main Street, and we gained others along the way. But Boulder Drive, Oliver Street, and Putnam Street, it was really necessary to allow for the signalization improvements there to create the 2-way traffic, both on Putnam, Main, and Boulder. Those are the 3 areas where we see the most loss of parking. And then the next section from rows 29 through 33 is just about time-limited parking. So we're going to be removing the meters on Main Street. So we're going to be instituting time-limited parking as opposed to metered parking. The next section, parking meter zones, relates to removing all the meters on Main Street. And then the one-way streets, 16959, is just changing that, Main Street will not be a one-way street, or at least for the duration of this project area. And then prohibited turns, it goes through some left-hand turns that are prohibited because we're really trying to encourage left-hand turning movements at signalized intersections or at areas with good sight lines. And then the right turn on red during signal prohibited, that's really at the Putnam and Main and intersection there, and Putnam and Oliver as well. The sight lines there are not great. The sight distance concerns were shared by police, DPW, and Time Bond, so we instituted no right-hand turns on red. And then the rest of them, honestly, are fairly straightforward beyond that. Stop intersections, yield, and required left and right turns, which are a part of traffic signalization. So the only other addition that is outside the scope of 169, but also needs to be considered, is formally closing Cushing Street and Depot Court. Cushing Street is going to be turned into a pedestrian plaza, whereas Depot Court, is that one street that connects right now northbound from Boulder Drive to Main Street. That won't exist anymore. At least it wouldn't seem appropriate for it to exist as Depot Court, because there'll be 2 lanes there, and it seems more appropriate to just call it Boulder Drive. So those are all the changes. Happy to take any questions. And of course, we've got Alex Vegnan from Ty and Bond, Nick Erickson, and Chief Martineau to answer some of the technical questions as well.
Is there anything that either of you would like to add to this?
Nope, I think it's been well said by Tom.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, any questions from counselors?
Sure.
Go right ahead, Councilor Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's just a side note question, Chief Martineau. How in the department will you guys handle such big changes as the 60-day window to all of these, to all these different rule changes here? How in the department will you guys be keeping up?
There is a lot of changes, but they're changes that we enforce each and every day. So I think the hardest part is, and I've had discussion with Tom about this, is, and for lack of better terms, when we do flip the switch and traffic's going in both directions, it's my intention to deploy a significant amount of police officers downtown as a controlling measure during that first week where people are really starting to learn the flow of traffic in a correct manner. But as far as enforcement and just it, I'm going to reiterate to the general public, you got to be aware of your surroundings. So it's going to be clearly marked, lines are going to be detailed, but this is a change in something we've been doing for the last 50 years. So that first time someone sees a car going that way on Main Street, it's going to be, oh, look what's coming. Mm-hmm. So it's my intention that first week, when we do the switch over, there'd be a significant amount of uniformed law enforcement, making sure that the traffic is going slow in the right direction and everybody's adhering to the amount of signs that are going to be posted. There will be significant amount of posting, both ends of Main Street, both ends of Boulder Drive, to indicate, the do's and don'ts to this major switchover. So I think it's going to be a bigger change to the general public, getting acclimated to it. But from an enforcement perspective, these are all different items that my officers enforce each and every day.
Right. And I guess more of my concern, was, we still have people on social media posting posts. Are they really changing to two-way main? And we've been planning this for I don't know how many years, so it's gonna be a shock to a lot of people.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Is there worth kind of putting officers down here as almost as you would in a construction zone to kind of move people around, or is it?
We've been in this experiment now for 6 months. I mean, traffic has been at a halt, with all the traffic going on, the amount of detail officers I've had downtown, the amount of foot officers that I've put in the downtown area over the last 6 months through CDBG funding. It's going to be a change, and I think you know, it's up to us to advertise it correctly, and let's make that change. And, you know, my number one priority is to make sure people are safe traveling up and down Main Street and Boulder Drive, and that's why tonight's discussion is so important, to give us the authority to enforce any violations in case something happens on those streets. But it's going to be a change and a learning process for all, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, Chief.
I'm confident in it.
Thank you.
And I have Councillor Van Hazinga next, but real quickly, I just wanted to confirm, I know the answer already because it's your constant practice every time we ask about it, but for the general public, would I be correct in assuming that, consistent with your usual MO, there will be a significant amount of leniency for inadvertent violations that are not reckless in nature? Discretion's
my greatest tool. And I think that answers it. Discretion is our greatest tool.
Excellent, thank you. I know you always use your discretion wisely, but I just want to reassure the public that if they just don't realize what they're supposed to be doing at a given point, they're not going to immediately.
It doesn't give a free pass to something egregious?
No, definitely not egregious. No, I mean, that's why I said where there's no recklessness involved.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to communicate to the public what I know you've told us before in other traffic situations. Certainly not trying to tell you what to do in this situation. That said, Councillor Van Hazinga.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just had a couple quick questions on some of the details for Director Skorowski. I know I've seen various versions of this plan over the years as we move forward towards this. On the bottom of Blossom Street entering Main Street, I have seen some plans that eliminated the left turn there towards the Water Street Bridge. And I don't see that here on this plan. I was just wondering if that's how the final decision was about how to handle that intersection.
So, this would be a good question for Alex as well. And Alex, feel free to chime in if I mess up here. But I believe when we had included a prohibited left turn there, originally it was because Cushing Street was going to continue in operation. And as we went through the various iterations with this plan, we had a department head meeting with, DPW, police and the mayor's office, and talked about that street needing to close off, just given the sight lines, the intersection's not aligned well, and it's not safe today. It would be even less safe in a two-way operation. So I think once we made that shift, I believe that allowed for us to continue allowing for that left turn on Blossom. But I could be wrong, Alex. I see Alex.
No, thank you. I just got admitted as a panelist, so thank you for Alex Fagnan with Time Bond here on behalf of Community Development. Thank you for having me. But no, Tom, you nailed it. Once Cushing was closed, we actually felt it's probably safer now with the left-hand turn than it is in the current condition. You're going to have what I would say, quote unquote, is a normal traffic pattern there, and it'll simply be a left turn coming out across those travel lanes. So it's included in the final plan.
Great, thank you very much. I think that makes sense. My other question is in that same area, the westbound traffic flow between Blossom and Day, there's going to be a right-hand turn only onto Blossom Street, it looks like. Makes sense. I was just wondering what opportunities we have to put signage on the Water Street Bridge to alert traffic that's turning onto Main Street on that left there. As I understand, I believe that's a Mass DOT controlled intersection. I was just wondering, have we started the process to get some signage there so cars queuing on the bridge know which lane to get into?
So I certainly know, we've been coordinating with MassDOT and the bridge rebuild, and I know that the redesign of the bridge will certainly incorporate this signage and this change into it. Nick Erickson might know better than me if there's been further discussion about signage changes in the interim. Might be something we need to look at.
So we haven't discussed that with Mass DOT as of yet. They are planning to replace that bridge. It's still several years off, but it is a city-owned intersection. Mass DOT is simply replacing the bridges for us, which we thank them very much for. But we can have that conversation with them as we move forward with the Water Street Bridge design to make sure that's incorporated. If there's anything temporary we need to do in the meantime, we can certainly look at that. This plan is intended to kind of be a trial, so if there's improvements that are warranted, obviously we're happy to make them.
Thank you. I think it's just an area where there's been a little back and forth about what the traffic pattern is for cars coming off the bridge. So it'd just be good to make sure that that's clear, because as cars come around that bend, there's a little bit of conflict sometimes between traffic continuing on Main or going up Blossom. So I just wanted to raise it as a concern, and thank you very much for giving it some consideration. Thank you.
Any further questions from committee members? All right, it looks like there are none. The matter is before the committee.
I make a motion to approve?
I have a motion. Second. And second to approve. If there is no objection, we will take this under unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. We now have 09222, Chief Ernest Martineau, Fitchburg Police Department, to add to Chapter 40 relative to the Fitchburg Police Department with respect to civilian traffic control specialists. Chief?
Thank you, Councilor. I'd like to begin with just giving this body a little bit of history, how this petition has come to this point before the body this evening as it's regarding traffic control specialists. During this time of year, obviously, there's an abundance amount of private details. When I'm talking private details, everybody refers to the police officer that's working the construction zones. During this time of year, it's not uncommon for the police department to field somewhere between 30 and 40 private requests each and every day to fill details throughout the city. As you can imagine, trying to fill 30 or 40 details a day can have a stress on the police department. Any given time, we're usually having 10 to 15 unfilled details a day, which really prompted our department to prioritize the way we distribute details. Obviously, Main Street, Boulder Drive, some of your extremely high-impact streets, those become priorities, and those details are filled first. Streets that have less flow of traffic, those are secondary, and when we can't fill them, we haven't been able to fill them after a vendor requested it. So we've been having difficulty filling details, but we also have another common problem, which I've said before this council many times, is recruiting police officers and all the regulations that have been developed since police reform and the legislation and the creation of the Police Officer Standard Training Council. Specifically is how we define police officers. Now, the state has moved where police officers are trained equally across the board. And here in the city of Fitchburg, one of my retired officers, when they retire, we bring them in front of this body as consideration as special police officers. To become a special police officer now in the Commonwealth, you have to have the exact amount of training as you would as a full-time police officer. What's happened is a lot of communities throughout the state are no longer having people that want to be specials. Thankfully so, I have an abundance of retired guys that want to continue on having that full authority as a police officer. So as we're thinking about how we can better our recruitment efforts and our retention efforts, we've been noticing a lot of departments, a lot of cities and towns across the state have been establishing traffic control systems, constables, traffic control specialists. There's different terms for it. We're very fortunate here where we have a university right in our backyard that has probably one of the most progressive criminal justice trainings or disciplines throughout the state. And the first thing that came to my mind was what a great pool of resources I have right around the corner. Now, they're not sworn police officers, but if I created a traffic control specialist program, I can recruit future police officers and try to hold on to them and retain them to stay here in the city and go on and have a career here in the city. Too often, our students at Fitchburg State are graduating and moving on to other cities and towns. So it was my belief that by creating this new unit of work, traffic control specialists, I could attract some of the students that are at Fitchburg State, offer them this part-time employment to fill these traffic control details, and try to entice them to stay within the city. More importantly, throughout the Commonwealth, there's a lot of cities and towns that just did away with special status police officers. And there's an abundance amount of retired police officers that are no longer specials, but bring years of experience on directing the flow of traffic. So the way I've negotiated this policy with our union, who has the collective rights to this work unit, is to incorporate retired police officers who are no longer specials, but more importantly, try to attract some of those students at Fitchburg State to get them into our police department, get them working with us hand in hand, and hopefully I can retain some of those young men and women up at Fitchburg State. To get to that next step, I had to bring it in petition form because I had created this in an ordinance form where it distinguishes exactly what I'm trying to accommodate as a traffic control specialist. These traffic control specialists, under my authority, will have the same authority as a sworn police officer under directing the flow of traffic. Thus, it will help me eliminate the amount of details that go unfilled each and every day. So that's what really prompted the creation of this petition, is to bring this forward, find another way to collaborate with Fitchburg State, try to keep a few of those kids that are up at that university in the criminal justice program, and also bring in some retired police officers whose cities no longer delegate them as special police officers. I believe it's a win-win for the city. These are details that are unfilled. Keep in mind, all details, there's an administrative fee that goes back to the city. So if I can fill those 30 details a day, it's positive for the entire city. It's going to give better control around traffic sites, and it's a way for me to really increase our recruitment possibilities at the police department. Be happy to answer any questions as it relates to this petition.
Questions from committee members? All right, the matter is before the committee.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
How, you said it's private, private work, right? Or is it, so does that mean the company pays the officer?
Yes, a great example right in front of us, PJ Albert, this Main Street conversion. You see the detail officers out there, they're getting paid by PJ Albert. The police department acts as the intermediate. We do the billing. We do get an administrative fee for that billing. And PJ Albert is the one that's actually paying the city of Fitchburg for those details. There's on a few occasions where we may be working for wastewater, DPW, that it may come into play, but those are very far and few apart. 98% of the details are all private details, whether it's Unitil, Asplin Tree, PJ Albert, the list of contractors goes on and on.
Mm-hmm. And I actually did some research into this one just to do my due diligence. I was talking to a state trooper, and he said that, I said, well, why not just a construction worker, because there's so much, it could be so much cheaper, right? $18 an hour, $25 an hour for a construction worker. And he said, good luck getting people to stop for a construction worker. The private companies, more often than not, want and ask for a police officer.
Keep in mind, under the authority of law, construction workers can't control the flow of traffic in that manner. Even regulated flaggers through the Commonwealth have some limits to their authority. The true authority of making safe a work zone comes from a police officer or a delegate. In this manner, it would be traffic control specialists, because number one, I'm making sure they're trained properly. I'm giving them the authority to direct the flow of traffic safely in or around work zones. So their response, and some part of it was correct, but at the end of the day, the ultimate authority, having the most latitude for directing the control of traffic safely around any construction zone, falls under a police officer's title or the authority that the chief gives them.
Thank you, Chief.
Any further questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and second to approve. If there is no objection, we will take this by unanimous consent. Seeing none, it is approved. That concludes our agenda for this committee.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Do I have a second on the motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and second to adjourn. There being no objection, we are adjourned.